Outbound trajectory correction burn was completed successfully this morning at 1:44 a.m. Eastern Time. As I mentioned, Orion continues to grow closer to the moon. We are now only 7,166 miles away. That's a change of 100 miles since our first check-in this morning. You can track Orion's place in the flight all throughout at nasa.gov/track Artemis. As we grow closer to the moon, of course, we continue to distance ourselves from Earth, now over 233,429 miles away. Orion traveling at 415 miles per hour. When Orion conducts the outbound powered flyby burn this morning, it will propel it, it will change the delta velocity by 586 feet per second. This is a 2-minute and 30-second burn. That's longer in comparison to some of those OTC burns we're seeing, which last typically 30 seconds or less. Again, you're looking at, obviously, a live view of our closest celestial neighbor, the moon, as Orion continues to grow closer for its closest approach this morning. The outbound powered flyby burn will begin at 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time. That's 7:44. The closest approach itself will happen at about 7:57. We'll be about 80 miles above the lunar surface. The outbound powered flyby is the first of a pair of maneuvers that's required to enter a distant retrograde orbit around the moon. The second will be the distant retrograde insertion maneuver. Distant retrograde insertion will happen on Friday. It's currently slated for coverage to begin at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, for distant retrograde insertion itself to occur at 4:52 p.m. Just yesterday, we entered the lunar sphere of influence at 2:09 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll remain in that sphere of influence, meaning the moon has the greatest gravitational pull on Orion until we prepare for distant retrograde insertion. So we anticipate to exit the gravitational sphere of influence of the moon on Thursday, November 24th. As the moon continues to grow larger in the frame of view, Orion is now less than 7,000 miles away, approximately 6,914 miles away from the moon. This animation, again, you can watch on nasa.gov/track Artemis any time of the day or night. The spacecraft is traveling 438 miles per hour. as we grow closer to the moon and it continues to take up more and more of the frame, it's easier to make out some of those craters. And again, this is a view from a camera mounted on the tip of one of the wings of Orion's solar arrays. There are 4 solar arrays on Orion, and in total, they can generate about 11 kilowatts of power. This helps Orion not rely on battery power the entire time, and is a major difference between the Orion capsule and the Apollo capsules, whereas the Apollo capsules use fuel cells instead of solar arrays. We're now 6,700 miles away from the moon. Orion is traveling 456 miles per hour. Again, today we are covering the outbound powered flyby, currently scheduled for 2 hours and less than 14 minutes from now. That'll be at 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time. We'll be targeting that closest approach at 7:57 a.m. when Orion will be about 80 miles above the lunar surface. Outbound powered flyby is a 2-minute and 30-second burn. This is the longest planned burn for Orion until the return powered flyby, currently targeted at about 3.5 minutes. While the outbound powered flyby burn sets us up for the distant retrograde insertion maneuver, the return powered flyby will instead prepare us and put us on the proper trajectory for our splashdown. Less than 2 hours and 8 minutes until the outbound powered flyby burn. The outbound powered flyby burn is scheduled for 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time, when Orion will be 328 statute miles above the moon, traveling at 5,023 miles per hour. That's in contrast to the current positioning. Orion is 6,400 miles away from the moon, traveling 487 miles per hour. At the time of closest approach, Orion will be 81 statute miles above the moon, traveling at 5,101 miles per hour. Again, we're tracking closest approach for 6:57 a.m. Central Time, 7:57 a.m. Eastern. And even though Orion will be passing around the far side of the moon today, we are currently at 233,349 miles away from Earth. This will not be our greatest distance from Earth during the mission. That will occur when Orion is in the distant retrograde orbit on next Monday, November 28th, at 3:05 p.m. Central Time, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, at 268,552 miles. Again, everything on track for the outbound powered flyby burn today at 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time. Orion now less than 6,300 miles away from the moon, moving at almost 500 miles per hour. This view is from the nasa.gov/track Artemis site. You can join this site at any time throughout the mission. We are keeping you updated 24/7 as we continue our journey around the moon and back to Earth. You'll be able to track the velocity, distance from the Earth, and distance to the moon at any time you choose. If you're just joining us, you're watching a live view of our one and only moon. This view coming from a camera on the tip of one of Orion's 4 solar arrays. The spacecraft now 6,220 miles away from our closest celestial neighbor, traveling 507 miles per hour. Orion launched atop the SLS on November 16th at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time. This is an uncrewed flight test. However, we do have some purposeful passengers on board. One of those is Munikin Campos, named after Arturo Campos, who was a valuable player during the Apollo 13 mission in Mission Control Houston. Commander Munikin Campos is a mannequin that will allow us to measure radiation, acceleration, and vibration data throughout the mission. The info gathered from him and the other two Phantom mannequins, Helga and Zohar, will help us prepare for future crewed missions. We're now 2 hours from the outbound powered flyby burn. Orion is 6,034 miles away from the moon. We've already increased, we have already grown 1,000 miles closer since when we began our broadcast this morning just 30 minutes ago. We've also continued to increase in velocity, now 530 miles per hour for the spacecraft on the maiden voyage of Artemis 1. At the time of the OPF burn at 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time, Orion will be traveling at 5,023 miles per hour. The mission management team gave the go for Orion to conduct the outbound powered flyby maneuver on Saturday during their daily meeting. Teams are tracking no issues that would prevent the spacecraft from entering into distant retrograde orbit. 5,800 miles away from the moon and continuing to grow closer as we prepare for the outbound powered flyby burn targeted for 7:44 a.m. Central Time. Again, the outbound powered flyby burn is the first of a pair of maneuvers that we need to enter that distant retrograde orbit beyond the moon. Today's burn at 7:44 will bring Orion closest to the moon, about 80 miles above it, at 7:57 a.m. Eastern Time. We also expect to lose communication with the spacecraft as it passes behind the moon for 34 minutes, starting at 7:26 a.m., but we will stay on air until it reemerges, and when we regain communications, it will be with the Goldstone ground station as part of NASA's Deep Space Network. Orion entered the lunar sphere of influence yesterday at 2:09 p.m. Eastern Time. That means the moon instead of the Earth is the main gravitational force acting on the spacecraft. Additionally, this morning, Orion completed the fourth outbound trajectory correction burn. These are pre-planned burns to keep Orion on course throughout the mission. And that fourth burn was executed at 1:44 a.m. Eastern Time. We are targeting 7:44 a.m. for the outbound powered flyby. Now just 5,520 miles from the moon and approaching. Again, this is nasa.gov/track Artemis. You can keep up with Orion's mission and its location during the flight at any time. We continue to increase in velocity as well, now approaching 600 miles per hour. And at the time of the outbound-powered flyby burn, we'll be traveling at 5,023 miles per hour. Outbound-powered flyby burn will be executed at 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time, 1 hour and 47 minutes from now. Six a.m. Eastern Time, and we are now 1 hour and 44 minutes away from the outbound powered flyby burn. Orion is now 5,335 miles away from the moon and continuing to grow closer. traveling 619 miles per hour. Again, you're watching live coverage ahead of the outbound powered flyby burn as we prepare to make our closest approach to the moon. It'll be about 80 miles above the lunar surface. This is the second burn that will be executed this morning. The first occurred successfully at 1:44 a.m. Eastern Time. That was the OTC-4 burn, which stands for Outbound Trajectory Correction Burn, ensuring Orion is on the proper path for its future mission. now approaching 4,900 miles away from the moon. Again, a large distance change in the time that we've been on air, less than an hour now. We originally started at over 7,000 miles away from the moon. We're traveling at 684 miles per hour. And just to put it in perspective, we are now 233,190 miles away from Earth. This is all in preparation for the outbound powered flyby burn. That'll be at 7:44 a.m. Eastern, 1 hour and 34 minutes from now. Teams are tracking no issues ahead of the outbound powered flyby burn. This is the first of 2 maneuvers that will put us in the distant retrograde orbit beyond the moon. You're looking at a view from nasa.gov/track Artemis, also known as ARROW, the Artemis real-time orbit website. You can log on at any time, day or night, and any phase of the mission and check out what Orion is doing and where it is in relation to the moon and the Earth. You can see here we are now 4,722 miles from the moon and continuing to grow closer, traveling 715 miles per hour. Now less than an hour and a half until the outbound powered flyby burn. Again, this is a 2-minute and 30-second burn. It'll take place around the far side of the moon and commits Orion to entry into distant retrograde orbit. There's a second part that's necessary, the distant retrograde insertion burn. That'll happen on Friday, November 25th, and that'll put us in the proper distant retrograde orbit. Now less than 4,500 miles away from the moon, continuing to grow closer ahead of the outbound powered flyby burn. Again, we're looking for that burn in an hour and 25 minutes from now, 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time. Orion is traveling at 757 miles per hour. This is a live view from the spacecraft itself. It is from a camera mounted on one of the solar array wings. We will lose communication with the spacecraft as it passes behind the moon. That loss of communication will occur for approximately 34 minutes, and again, we're tracking that here. That loss of communication will start at 7:26 a.m., so 1 hour and 7 minutes from now. We'll remain on air throughout the time that Orion is out of reach from our satellites here on Earth. Orion is now 4,182 miles away from the moon, 233,089 miles away from our home planet Earth. This is a live view from the Track Artemis, or the NASA.gov/Track Artemis feature. It's a telemetry-driven animation called Arrow, the Artemis real-time orbit website that you can access anytime during the mission. That allows you to keep a look at where Orion is and what phase of the mission it's in, as well as take a look at what's coming up next for the spacecraft. What's coming up next this morning is the outbound powered flyby burn at 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time, when Orion will be 328 statute miles above the moon. This prepares us for the closest approach at 7:57 a.m. Eastern Time, when Orion will be just 81 statute miles above our lunar neighbor. Currently, the spacecraft is traveling at 824 miles per hour, and during the time of OPF, the spacecraft will be traveling at 5,023 miles per hour. We are now less than 4,000 miles away from the moon. Actually, 3,900 to be exact, traveling at 876 miles per hour. We are 1 hour and 12 minutes away from the outbound powered flyby burn, scheduled for 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time. Everything on track for the burn this morning. At closest approach after the burn, we will be just 80 miles above the lunar surface. Again, this is an uncrewed flight test. We have no astronauts aboard the Artemis 1 mission. We're doing this mission in preparation for astronauts to fly aboard for Artemis 2 and our future missions in the Artemis program. Again, this is a telemetry-driven animation. You can track Artemis anytime at nasa.gov/track-Artemis through the Artemis Real-Time Orbit website, also known as ARROW. That'll give you the stats on the spacecraft, as well as where we are during the mission. This is live any time of the day or night, so when we're not on air, you can still keep up with where Orion is. At the start of our broadcast just an hour and 20 minutes ago, Orion was over 7,000 miles away from the moon. We're now coming up on 3,630 miles away from the moon, 233,000 miles away from Earth, and traveling at 940 miles per hour. That velocity has increased as well and will continue to do so. At the time of the OPF, or outbound powered flyby burn, at 7:44 a.m. Eastern, Orion will be traveling at over 5,023 miles per hour. We're tracking outbound powered flyby burn to take place in 1 hour and 6 minutes from now. The go for that burn came 2 days ago from the mission management team when they met for their daily briefing. Now 1 hour from the outbound powered flyby maneuver targeted for 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time. Orion is 3,300 miles away from the moon, traveling 1,025 miles per hour. Thanks for joining us for our live coverage this morning. This is a live view from a camera on the tip of Orion's solar array wing aimed at our destination, the moon. We are now 3,098 miles away from the moon, traveling at 1,085 miles per hour, just 56 minutes away from the outbound powered flyby. That outbound powered flyby is targeted for 7:44 a.m. Eastern Time. We're happy to have brought you this extended coverage this morning, and for now, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague, Sandra Jones, to take you all the way through outbound powered flyby.
We're continuing to bring you live coverage of the upcoming outbound powered flyby of Orion, now scheduled for 53 minutes and 30 seconds from now. Orion is already in the moon's sphere of influence, and yesterday the team completed a successful outbound trajectory correction burn. This burn helps set us up for the OPF burn, again coming up in about 53 minutes from now. At the time of the OPF burn, Orion will be 328 statute miles above the moon. And then just a short time from then, Orion will complete its closest approach to the moon at 81 miles above the lunar surface. Now, during this time, we will not have signal with Orion because it will be traveling behind the backside of the moon. However, we expect to regain communications once Orion swings back around to the other side and is back on the deep space network. The outbound powered flyby will send Orion close enough to the lunar surface to leverage the moon's gravitational force and swing the spacecraft once around the moon toward entry into what we call a distant retrograde orbit. Following this, Orion will remain in the distant retrograde orbit for one long elliptical orbit around the moon, lasting about 6 days. Now, this orbit is called distant due to the high altitude from the moon. It's about 40,000 miles past the moon in its orbit, which is actually 30,000 miles farther than the previous record set during Apollo 13. And this will be the farthest in space any spacecraft built for humans will have ever flown. This orbit is also called retrograde because Orion will be traveling around the moon opposite the direction the moon travels around the Earth. This DRO provides a highly stable orbit where little fuel is required to stay for an extended trip in deep space in order to put Orion's systems through its paces and to the tests in an environment far from Earth ahead of crewed flights. Here in Mission Control Houston, things remain relatively calm now 5 days, 5 hours since Orion's liftoff aboard the Space Launch System from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The next major milestone that we're tracking ahead of today's burn will be a go-no-go poll where Flight Director Rick LeBrode will poll the team here in Mission Control on key systems required for the upcoming burn. On your screen, you're continuing to get a live view of the moon taken from one of the solar array wing or SAW cameras on board the Orion spacecraft. Orion is traveling at 1,248 miles per hour and is only 2,600 miles away from the moon at this time. Again, upon closest approach, Orion will be about 80 miles off of the surface of the moon. Now, we will be in that anticipated and expected loss of signal during that closest approach. However, we do expect to regain signal with Orion just about 2 minutes after the closest approach, where we will regain communications with the vehicle. If you're just joining us, we're bringing you live coverage of today's upcoming outbound-powered Flybye burn, which will slingshot us around the backside of the moon. You are continuing to get views of the moon in real time here on your screen from a solar array wing camera on board Orion. Today's burn will take place with the Orbital Maneuvering System, or OMS engine. This engine has been used several times throughout Orion's 5-day journey to the moon. This is that large engine located on the bottom of the service module. And the engine can provide 6,000 pounds of thrust. Today's burn will last 2 minutes and 30 seconds, but the burn can be used for burns lasting up to 16 minutes in length. The OMS engine on board Orion is a repurposed Space Shuttle Orbital Maneuvering System engine that has flown in space before. It flew on 19 Space Shuttle flights, beginning with STS-41G in October of 1984 and ending with STS-112 in October of 2002. Now, the OMS engine is not the only engine on board the Orion spacecraft. There are also 8 auxiliary engines. These are located on the bottom of the service module as well, but in 4 sets of 2. These are used to provide trajectory corrections and as a backup to the main engine, and each engine provides about 100 pounds of thrust. In total, there are 33 engines aboard Orion, and here on your screen you are getting a quick glimpse of planet Earth. We do expect to regain those videos and imagery here shortly, but for now you're looking at a telemetry-driven animation of Orion and its location. As you can see here on your screen, speed continuing to pick up, now at 1,369 miles per hour. Over 232,000 miles from home, but only 2,000 miles away from the moon. Again, at closest approach will be just over 80 miles above the lunar surface, continuing to close in on the backside of the moon. At this time, we're 15 minutes away from the planned go, no-go poll, where Flight Director Rick LeBrode will poll the team here in Mission Control ahead of today's upcoming outbound powered flyby burn. And you're looking at a live view inside Mission Control Houston. We're in the white flight control room today. There in the center of your screen, who just sat down, is Flight Director Rick LeBrode, who is leading the team here in Mission Control this morning. Sitting next to him is another Flight Director, Zeb Scoville. We'll have the opportunity to speak with Zeb here in just a few minutes about the upcoming burn. Orion is now 2,000 miles away from the moon, continuing to close in on its destination for this particular burn, the backside of the moon. The outbound powered flyby is the goal of today's operation. This outbound powered flyby will send Orion close enough to the lunar surface to leverage the moon's gravitational force and swing the spacecraft once around the moon toward entry into distant retrograde orbit. Following this, Orion will remain in the distant retrograde orbit for one long elliptical orbit around the moon, which will last about 6 days. Following this, Orion will perform a similar maneuver called the return-powered flyby, which will put it on the trajectory to return back to Earth ahead of a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean on December 11th. Now, the first time a NASA vehicle flew behind the backside of the moon with crew on board was first done during Apollo 8. And here you are looking at a live view of the Orion spacecraft from the solar array wing, with the moon in the distance of the screen, the Earth in the distant frame of the screen, and the moon up close. Again, we are now less than 2,000 miles away from the moon, but over 200,000 miles away from planet Earth. Orion started its journey 5 days ago from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where it launched aboard the Space Launch System. Orion has been traveling to the moon ever since, performing checkouts of its systems, as this is an uncrewed test flight. It's critical that NASA tests out the hardware and systems aboard Orion ahead of flying a crew on board Artemis 2.